You're no doubt familiar with the term hot hatch. Of course you are. You take a small car, you add loads of power, and you've got a hot hatch. What about warm hatch? Well, it's less familiar, but that's because there are fewer warm hatchbacks. Today, I'm driving one of those warm hatchbacks, the new Kia Ceed GT. Now, before I say anything else, I will do what every YouTuber does, and I will ask you to like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with other people, subscribe if you're interested, and click the little bell icon, then you get notifications. That would all be very kind of you. Yes, after a long wait, I am behind the wheel of the Ceed GT, and I've actually been quite looking forward to it. I first drove the new standard Ceed in the summer of 2018, in Slovakia of all places, but that's because that's where the Ceed and the Sportage are built. If you haven't already seen that video, might I recommend that you go and watch that. You can just click the link somewhere here. If I'm honest, I was quite surprised. It's such a good little hatchback, and it shows you just how far Kia has come since they first introduced the Ceed in the UK in 2007. Then at the end of 2018, I went to Barcelona to see the new Ceed GT. I also saw a very loud, very rude Spanish man who clearly didn't have any idea how to hold a conversation on a telephone without being incredibly loud. For reference though, the old Ceed GT, that would do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 7.3 seconds. But that's besides the point. I'm over it, honest. Because I knew how good the standard Ceed was, I thought, oh, actually, this could be quite interesting. And sure enough, it was. It looked fantastic inside and out, and it looks as well as if mechanically Kia had done enough to raise its game above the standard Ceed. The only slight disappointment was that Kia didn't give the new Ceed GT any more power over the previous Ceed GT. Anyway, now I am finally in the driver's seat. So what's it like? Well, let's start with the engine, and as I said, you get the same amount of power as you did in the old Ceed GT. It's 201 brake horsepower and 196 pounds-feet of torque. It makes an okay noise, and you've got a little sport button down here on the centre console, so you can make it louder outside, but also make it louder inside. It also sharpens up the throttle response, makes the steering a bit heavier, backs off the traction and stability controls a little bit. But there aren't any crazy whooshes or anything like that you might get in some other hatchbacks, some actual hot hatchbacks. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 7.2 seconds, and the top speed is 143 miles an hour. So it's quick, but it's not super fast. It's not hot hatchback territory. It is, after all, a warm hatch. It's more of a cup of tea rather than a double espresso. Below 3,000 RPM though, in more serious hatchbacks, you get a real thump, a real kick of torque. In this, you don't get that. Peak torque is between 1,500 RPM and 4,500 RPM, but honestly, below 3,000, 2,800 really, it doesn't have that kick, that shove that you might want it to have. You really need to work the gears hard and keep the engine on the boil. And also, I think the engine holds onto its revs a little bit too much as well. Sometimes when you rev it, it takes ages for the revs to drop back down again. I don't know whether that's the flywheel or what it is, but it does take a long time for the revs to drop. Speaking of gears, you get 3 pedals and a 6-speed manual, but there is also, new for this Ceed GT, a 7-speed double clutch gearbox. Sounds like an interesting option, but I haven't tried it yet. This 6-speed manual though, it's a nice little gearbox. It feels very similar to the gearbox in the standard Ceed, and that's no bad thing. It just feels a little bit heavier. The suspension is very similar to the standard Ceed. It's independent suspension all the way around. There are some key differences though, like the ride height has been dropped by 5mm. The geometry has been changed. The rear anti-roll bar, that's softer, but the springs are all firmer. It is definitely firmer than a standard Ceed, but it's still really compliant. You've got really good wheel control. There isn't much roll, and you've got oodles of grip. The Ceed GT has Michelin Pilot Sport 4s as standard, and they are very good tyres, or a very sticky set of boots. As for the brakes, they're strong, but they're in proportion to the performance that's on offer. At the back, you've got 272mm solid discs. At the front, however, you've got 320mm ventilated discs. That's 32mm bigger than the standard Cee'd front discs. They're also 3mm thicker. Finally, the steering. The steering on the old Cee'd GT was always its weak point. It just felt overly light and unnatural. It never inspired any confidence. Everything else about the car was actually alright, but it was just the steering that really let it down. With this car, it feels much better. It isn't the most communicative system, but it just feels a lot more trustworthy. It feels like you can turn the wheel and place the car where you want it to, rather than just guessing all the time. What about the looks? Well, inside and out, I think it's a really handsome machine. On the outside, you get different bumpers, you get bigger wheels, you get red brake calipers, you get some red detailing inside the grille itself, and of course you get GT badges everywhere. And also, I don't know whether you can tell that this is a Kia, judging by the Kia badge and the Kia number plate. If anyone was ever worried that this wasn't a Kia, it is a Kia. And on the inside, it's a normal Cee'd, but with some sporty details, like this not quite round steering wheel with a GT badge on it, aluminium pedals, these slightly more supportive seats, and red stitching. Compared to the old Cee'd GT, this is just a much, much nicer place to be. The quality of all the materials has just been lifted, and everything feels logically laid out. You've got some good old-fashioned analog dials with a little digital display in the middle, which has a boost gauge. That's very important. Yes, like that a lot. And you've got a navigation screen, but underneath you've got physical controls for the basic things that you need a lot of the time, like the heater controls or the radio. Overall, do I think it's a bit of a shame that Kia played it safe almost? They stuck with a warm hatch rather than going after a proper hot hatch. Yes, I do think it's a bit of a shame. I think Kia could have really done something very special. I mean, look at Hyundai, Kia's sister company, with the i30N. That's a fantastic car, and I kind of hope that Kia would do the same thing. But that aside, judging this car on what it is, it's a good car. It feels like Kia has taken the standard Cee'd, which is already a very good car, and just made lots and lots of little things a tiny bit better. And the reason it works so well is because everything is balanced. You've got big enough brakes for the performance on offer. You haven't got the stiffest suspension, but then again, you don't need it. It all just gels really well as a complete package. If you're interested in dipping a toe into the world with a performance hatchback, this is a very good place to start.